if you're on the brink of just giving up, throwing in the towel, I want you to do a quick inventory and start with these. Do I make it easy for me to adhere to the plan that I want to follow, that I know I should follow? Or do my actions make it harder? Do they impede me being adherent consistently? And I'm not talking about someone who has a slip up and they're like, yeah, I didn't anticipate this. My partner surprised me with this meal, or, someone gave me these things from work, but I had one, tossed them out. It's like there are allowances and there is incidental calories that I'm sure in some form or fashion will find their way into your diet. But really what this question poses is like, are you doing things actively to diffuse some of the resistance that is making it hard for you to stay on plan? And if you're not, or on the contrary, if you're making it harder for you to stay on plan, let's say someone who really does struggle staying on track when they go out to eat. When you go out to eat, are you talking about, when you're going out to eat with someone, are you discussing whether or not it fits your dietary needs? Are you a part of the decision making? And I get it. Sometimes some of y'all work with clients, so you're like, hey, they kind of pick the restaurant, fine dining. I don't really have an option to say no. And that's okay. In those instances, there are absolutely ways that we can account for these additional calories. And that may even be something that we just develop when we set the target calories for you to hit that week. I'll tell you a story. I had a client who would travel very often. She's like, I have one flight, at least 2 flights a week to go see clients on the East Coast, flying from the West Coast. So a lot of time in the air, a lot of time in the airport, very last minute travel arrangements too. And a lot of the times that I'm meeting clients, it is at restaurants where I'm not really able to make substitutions, or it's just generally bad etiquette too. Cool. With her program, what I did is ensure, because she's a fairly small woman, I'm like, okay, so on these days, we need to consider how much you're going to be over even what you're relatively tracking. So you go out, you go to a steakhouse, maybe they bring you butter rolls. Okay, well, that's going to be even one is going to be 200 to 400 calories, just depending on how much you use. Cool. So what I'd recommend, not having that, or if you're going to have it, have half. Don't use the butter. Cool. Going into the next appetizers, entrees, maybe order something that is going to be lower fat. Fats are going to find their way into your diet one way or another when you're eating out. And for her, I was like, typically they have a dietary option that's either vegetarian, pescatarian, something that's going to be on the leaner side. And if that's the case, that's what I would order. It's very reasonable to ask for dressing on the side. And I don't even think that socially is disruptive if you even want to go there. But just asking hey, can I have it on the side? That way you can control how much is put on there. Cool. Okay. We just did free appetizers. If there is a side salad, cool, have what you can. But if it is loaded up, that's some of this is going to have to be decisions made on the fly. I've gone to places where they just give you romaine, red onion, and there's no croutons, there's no nuts. It's just literally house salad. You have a 400 calorie little little bowl of dressing that you can then put on. With those, it's I don't tend to eat them without dressing, but I will be very mindful of the amount I'm putting on depending on what they bring. Same thing goes for your entree. It's okay, you typically get to select 2 sides at most places unless it just comes as is. And if it comes as is, then you do need to be mindful of okay, butter sauces, you might not be able to order them off of the entree. But what you can do is you can eat it and you can just say, okay, I'm going to eat however many calories this is, but now I'm going to have to budget throughout the rest of the day. And that very well might mean that you're only eating protein the rest of the day. And this isn't ideal for prep. Not at all. But what I will say is that for more of the recreationalist, the hobbyist, the person who's focused on their physique and trying to make improvements, what I would do is treat these days. Because for her, this was 3 to 4 days a week. So I'm okay, these meals, you're going to probably go over. So what we can do is until you get your footing, until you get a good rhythm, we're just going to have to assume you probably need to undereat if the constraints of the meal require that you do, if it's I don't know, she would do full tasting menus. And she's yeah, it's not going to be Italian, but it's going to be French. So there's going to be a lot of butter. We're going to have wine. I'm cool. it's an untracked meal. We can't really divvy up like how much it's actually going to be, but we can assume it's going to be a lot. So priority outside of that is protein intake. This was a really big transition for her to make. But what she found was that, okay, because of these days being higher calorie, and what we found is like these days actually needed to be a maintenance day for her, whereas the other days she had an opportunity to really push hard because she was then fueled at a higher intake. Some would even call this carb cycling, and maybe not even so much carb cycling, but calorie cycling, having higher days, having lower days. And what we found is because her goals were fat loss, I'm like, okay, so we need to schedule this phase around times that you have less of these things happening. So it works. She's like, I know that this time of the month or this time of the year, I'm going to very much be on the road, and it's going to be expected that I do this very often. So in turn, my counter offer was, why don't we use this time to build? We need to build muscle anyway. Your body fat's not too high. It would make a lot of sense to put you in a position where you're already going to get the food in anyway. You're for sure not going to undereat because you have opportunities to capitalize on nicer, higher food. Within this, we still need to be strict because it's very easy for you to go over on these meals because of the fat intake. So still need to prioritize protein outside of this, but we have a little leeway. We can kind of use scale weight to determine if there was any real damage done on a weekly basis.